Tony, you have had a varied career. You actually led the UN response to Ebola, which you talked about yesterday, and now manage Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's philanthropy. I guess I'll just start by, I know that transition happened earlier this year where you stepped into this new role. Can you tell me about some of your priority areas when it comes to philanthropy and some of the maybe similarities and differences in these very different roles?
Paul Allen's priorities for his philanthropy his priority is to attack the world's biggest problems. So he's very focused on climate change, first and foremost, also oceans and protecting the oceans, and wildlife conservation. He's also, though, based on his experience in Ebola, where he contributed $100 million to the response, looking at what are the residual gaps in the world's preparedness for pandemics, and is there something he can usefully do in that area? So that's something we're actively looking at.
Now, it seems like one of the ways to apply the lessons learned is to collaborate. That was a big focus of yesterday's session and of CGI in general. And yet you made the good point that it is up to the global health community to collaborate, but not to figure out how to collaborate, and it's easier said than done. So given that, what's the way forward? How do you recommend, if we know that we need to collaborate with unlikely allies, how do we do that?
I think it's an issue that is always underestimated in its importance and its difficulty. So you have experts, whatever the area is, let's say it's humanitarian response or a global health emergency, you have experts in logistics or public health or communications or training or whatever it is. But all too often, there's not actually the role of the entity that's bringing everyone together and putting the plan in place and making sure everyone has a clear understanding of their responsibilities and when they're going to deliver on those, what the timeline is, resource allocation issues. And in fact, that was one of the things that was really missing in the whole Ebola response. There were a lot of actors doing good work, MSF, UNICEF, WHO, national governments, but there was no plan to end Ebola. There was no one in charge of ending Ebola. There was no objective set of, we need to end Ebola and we're going to bring all the different actors together to collaborate. That's the role that UN mission, UNMIR, ended up playing, but that was in an emergency context. Now, when we're not in an emergency context, we need to spend much more time and effort, not just on saying we're going to collaborate, but figuring out how to do that and assigning effort to make that happen.
Now, I know you're about to head into a session around the Elephant Action Network, which is one of the CGI networks. And I know conservation and the elephant topic as well is of huge importance to Paul Allen. Can you talk about the cross-learnings, not only from Ebola to Zika and other pandemics, but the cross-learnings maybe from your own experience on Ebola when it comes to something like elephant action?
Well, really, Paul Allen is very committed to elephant and wildlife conservation. Elephants are facing a tremendous threat. The results of the Great Elephant Census that Paul conceived and implemented, multi-year effort, first of its kind, to count all the African savanna elephants. Results came out a couple weeks ago, shows 30% decline from 2007 to 2014. One elephant every 15 minutes is being killed by poaching. We are facing a crisis. There are so many important issues right now that the world is facing, but an urgent one is the meeting taking place in Johannesburg on the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES. Conference of Parties is taking place, and there is a resolution before it to ban the domestic trade in ivory. It's very controversial. There's some opposition among some African countries who want to be able to continue the domestic trade because they want to be able to sell ivory. From a conservation perspective, urgent that resolution to ban the domestic trade in ivory is passed. I would beseech everyone to contact their governments and urge them to fight vigorously to ensure that resolution will pass so we can help protect the remaining elephants in Africa.